U.S. fraud case led investigators to Kenya. It started quietly, as most major financial crimes do. In the United States, federal authorities were tracking suspicious activity linked to government-funded programs meant to serve vulnerable communities. On paper, the money was being spent on food, childcare services, and emergency relief. But behind the paperwork, something was very wrong. Millions of dollars were leaving U.S. government accounts, yet the services they were meant to support either never existed or were grossly exaggerated.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Luxury cars, private villas, and overseas wire transfers. Newly obtained documents are laying bare just how far a group of Minnesota fraudsters went to blow through hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money.
As investigators followed the money, the trail didn't stop in America. It led across borders and eventually to Kenya. According to U.S. authorities, the alleged fraud amounted to 39 billion shillings, roughly 100 million U.S. dollars. What began as a domestic investigation quickly turned into an international case involving shell companies, false invoices, and individuals accused of moving illicit funds out of the United States. Court filings and investigative reporting show that the suspects allegedly used fake vendor contracts to bill government programs for services that were never delivered. Payments were approved, money was released, and soon after, large sums began moving through multiple accounts. Some of that money, investigators say, was withdrawn in cash. Other portions were wired abroad. Kenya emerged as one of the destinations where funds were allegedly sent and later invested.
This story did not begin in Africa. It did not begin in Kenya. It did not begin in Somalia. It began in the United States, inside a government program meant to feed vulnerable children during the pandemic. Money that was meant to buy food, provide care, and protect families quietly disappeared. And as investigators followed the trail, they did not just find missing funds. They found an international network. The money crossed oceans, it crossed borders, and it eventually arrived on African soil. Tonight, we are going to calmly walk through what happened, what investigators say, and what it means for communities, for accountability, and for Africa's global image.
Tonight, we've got new information for you about massive fraud in the Feeding Our Future investigation. One of the ringleaders is going to prison for nearly 30 years.
Investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen was in federal court
in stealing taxpayer money meant to help feed kids during the pandemic. Judge Nancy Brazel saying in court, "I cannot find any reason for the behavior other than pure unmitigated greed."
Not only took tens of millions of dollars, but laundered much of it abroad and sent much of it to Kenya, among other things.
Lead prosecutor Joe Thompson was asking for 30 years, calling it the kind of nightmare in Minnesota, where he recently told 5 Eyewitness News government fraud overall could exceed $1 billion.
Does a sentence like this one get you any closer to recovering more money for taxpayers?
Well, it speeds it up. Now that he's been sentenced, we can actually execute on that forfeiture, sell that property off, and return it to the taxpayers.
With his family in the gallery at the federal courthouse in Minneapolis, Farah said, "I want to apologize to the state and the country that has given me so much." But that apology focused largely on his admitted attempt to bribe a juror at the end of his trial last year.
The sense I got was he's sorry he got caught.
The U.S. Attorney's Office estimates they've been able to get back $60 to $70 million so far, but prosecutors point out that money Farah sent overseas will likely never be recovered.
This is where the scale of the case becomes clear. A key figure in this investigation has now been sentenced to nearly 30 years in federal prison. Prosecutors say tens of millions of dollars were taken, and that much of it was sent overseas. What makes this particularly serious is that the money was not corporate profit, it was public money, emergency relief, intended to feed children. Investigators say only a fraction of it has been recovered so far, and once money crosses borders and disappears into private networks, recovery becomes extremely difficult. This case is not just about crime, it is about trust and about public responsibility.
Tonight, we reveal how some fraudsters are still benefiting from their crimes even after being charged and convicted.
Investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen has been following the Feeding Our Future fraud for nearly 4 years, and he's here with what's standing in the way of getting your money back.
Well, we do know a lot of the $250 million stolen from taxpayers is tied up in property and other things. Federal prosecutors say they're seizing it, but at least in some high-profile cases, viewers told us that still has not happened. So we went to check it out. All right, here I go. From this 5-bed, 4.5 bath in Washington County to a $1 million house in Plymouth, complete with an indoor basketball court. My name is Eric Rasmussen. I'm a reporter with KSTP. Another right off this county road in Burnsville. Do you know if the government is trying to take this house? No. They're not? We had to see these properties for ourselves. Each house owned by people convicted of fraud, connected to Feeding Our Future. $250 million meant to help kids in need, stolen at the height of the pandemic.
We've property all over the state, in different parts of the country.
But long after prosecutors filed paperwork to seize properties purchased with stolen taxpayer dollars, neighbors told 5 Investigates that still has not happened. Is it fair for the public to want answers about what's being done?
Absolutely. It's our money.
Mark Osler is a professor at the St. Thomas Law School and a former federal prosecutor.
This is something in criminal law that too often gets forgotten, the money side of it. You know, we pay attention to the body when someone walks into court, when they're taken away to prison. But the harm is often in the money.
Take former Safari restaurant owner Salim Saeed. 5 guilty verdicts now. A jury convicted him and Feeding Our Future founder Amy Bach nearly 9 months ago. But we found Saeed and his wife are still the official owners of this $1.1 million house in Plymouth. Fraud money funded their $952,000 down payment in 2021. And county records show they've racked up more than $50,000 in delinquent property taxes since then. No one responded to the note I left, but a week later we did see someone leaving in a Cadillac. Prosecutors say they have to wait for Salim Saeed to be sentenced before they can take the property. But that doesn't explain this one. Records show the owner of this house in Willerny is Jonathan Ross, the husband of Sharon Ross.
We want to keep that program going.
The former director of House of Refuge Twin Cities was sentenced to prison in February for her role in the Feeding Our Future fraud. That should have cleared the way for the government to take the property, but we found a car registered to Ross's husband still sitting in the driveway. We are also asking about this house in Burnsville, owned by former Feeding Our Future employee Abdiaziz Farah. Do you know Mr. Farah? Right before being named in the first indictments in 2022, Amy Bach's right-hand man fled the country. Do you know where he is? That's the voice of Idle's ex-wife, according to a second person who spoke to me from behind the front door. Ex-husband. Sure enough, a month after investigators say Idle put down $95,000 on his new house, records show he and his wife filed for divorce. A mutual agreement, living in the same house, they wrote, right before Idle disappeared.
Instead of having to go through that person and try to extradite him and all of that, we can go directly after the property. I'm sure that's what's being considered. But it's still frustrating we don't have the body, too, that individual who was so culpable.
I'm going to leave my information here. So what else can be done?
Public attention always helps. So what you're doing is certainly going to help.
For now, Osler says taxpayers will have to be patient.
The most likely outcome is that these properties will be seized, they'll be sold, the public will get the money back.
For weeks now, we've been asking prosecutors specific follow-up questions about these 3 properties. And I can tell you in just the last 45 minutes, I got a call back from the lead prosecutor, Joe Thompson. He says they have to let the full legal process play out. In each of these cases, he added that the value of what they have seized so far is significant, somewhere between $60 and $70 million. And I can tell you when I went back to check court records today, which we've been doing a lot lately, I did find the U.S. Attorney's Office just reached a settlement to recover an additional $227,000 that was tied up in a property in Kentucky. That one was previously owned by another defendant in these Feeding Our Future cases that was sentenced earlier this summer. So the bottom line is the process is happening, maybe not as fast as some people would like.
Slowly.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much.
A lot for taxpayers to absorb, no doubt. This latest story started with tips from viewers. If you have concerns about waste, fraud, or abuse in government programs, our investigative team wants to hear from you. You can send them at tip@kstp.com.
Here we see something that often frustrates the public. Even after convictions, some individuals are still living in properties allegedly purchased with stolen money, homes, vehicles, assets. Prosecutors say legal procedures must be followed before seizure is completed. But the public naturally asks, why does the benefit remain while the harm is already confirmed? This reminds us of a wider global challenge. Justice is not only about punishment, it is also about restoration, and restoration must be timely to truly heal public trust. Here,
7 more people connected to the Feeding Our Future scandal are set to go on trial next year.
But now defense attorneys say the intense focus on fraud in Minnesota makes it impossible for them to get a fair trial here.
Investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen's live in Minneapolis with the new change of venue motion, which calls out a, quote, hostile atmosphere. Eric?
So, you know, I've covered 2 huge trials here at the federal courthouse in Minneapolis connected to Feeding Our Future. But as you say, now defense attorneys say all of the attention on fraud and the Somali community since then has made it impossible to find a new unbiased pool of jurors for the next trial. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say Feeding Our Future?
Fraud.
Steps away from the federal courthouse in Minneapolis. Have you ever heard of Feeding Our Future?
Yes, I have. I have not.
We got a variety of answers to that question.
Have you ever heard of Feeding Our Future?
Yeah. Now lawyers for 7 more Somali defendants connected to Feeding Our Future want their trial moved out of state. This motion for a change of venue calling out unrelenting negative publicity driven by the U.S. Attorney's Office, local media, even members of Congress and the president. All of it, they say, leaving them with a jury pool constantly inundated with news that Somalis are essentially serial fraudsters.
I would have been surprised if the defense hadn't filed this motion.
But Erica McDonald, a former judge and U.S. attorney for Minnesota, says change of venue motions are rarely granted because the burden is on the defense and it's entirely up to the judge's discretion.
It's not whether the juror has ever heard about it, whether the juror has read anything about fraud or anything like that. The question is whether the juror can be fair and impartial in this particular case.
The U.S. Attorney's Office declined to comment on this latest motion, but in the past they cited higher profile cases that did not get a change of venue.
We, the jury, in the above entitled matter, find the defendant guilty.
Including the murder trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, and even the Boston Marathon bombing.
And I can tell you the cases I've presided over, even cases that did have significant pretrial publicity, you would be surprised at how many jurors say, I didn't read anything about it.
This new change of venue motion seeks to move the next trial to the Northern District of Illinois, which includes Chicago. Now, the judge here is not expected to take this up for consideration until sometime after the new year.
This is where the story becomes socially sensitive. Some members of the Somali community in Minnesota say the intense media focus has created pressure, stigma, and fear of being unfairly judged as a group. It is important to pause here and be clear. Crime is individual. Responsibility is personal. No community should carry the burden of the actions of a few. At the same time, transparency is necessary because public money belongs to everyone. This is where balance becomes essential. Justice without stereotyping. Accountability without collective blame.
I want to talk about use of funds. You've talked about some of these funds were used to buy property in Kenya.
Yes, sir.
Property in Turkey. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Remittances back to Somalia.
Yes.
I think it's important for the committee to understand that these remittances in part are used in what's called the Hawala. I want to make sure I have the terminology right. The Hawala network. Ms. Robbins, can you speak to what the Hawala network is?
Yes. So it's an informal network where someone goes to a Hawala place in Minneapolis, which is like a money exchange or a money sending site, and they say, I want to send X amount of dollars, and then there's a receiving site in Somalia, and they put the cash take the cash out. So money doesn't cross the border. It's an order for money here that gets transmitted to Somalia.
For the time, because I'm out of time, I want to expound. In Somalia and other parts in the Middle East region writ large, a Hawala network is a bunch of money exchangers, hand to hand, not bank account to bank account.
Exactly.
And what is clear in Somalia and other parts is that Al-Shabaab, the largest Al-Qaeda affiliate in Somalia, they have their hands all through this network. So taxpayer money, United States dollars, that are being remitted into Somalia, in part, have been utilized or have fallen into the hands of Al-Shabaab. Do you think that's a correct assessment?
Yes, we have plenty of evidence of that, from money directly going to Al-Shabaab, but then also indirectly because they take a cut of whatever gets sent to Somalia.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I know I'm over. Thank you for the additional time.
Now we begin to understand how money moves. Investigators describe the use of informal money transfer systems, including Hawala networks. These systems are not inherently criminal. They exist to help families support each other across borders, but they can also be exploited. Money moved through informal channels is harder to trace, and once funds are mixed with legitimate remittances, tracking becomes even more complex. This is not just a U.S. issue. This is a global financial governance issue.
Arrest of a Somali immigrant in Minnesota seen pictured with local Democrat leaders, Governor Tim Walz and Congressman Ilhan Omar. ICE says that he was convicted of welfare fraud in Canada and should not have been eligible for temporary status here in the United States. Correspondent Garrett Tenney tells us the backstory here from Chicago. Hi, Garrett.
Yeah, Martha, the immigration judge in that Somali man's case denied his asylum request specifically because of the significant amount of fraud on his record. That was in 2004, but for some reason, Abdul Dahir Ibrahim was granted temporary protected status for 10 years, even after he had an order of removal. Altogether, DHS says it has arrested more than 12 individuals so far as part of its newly launched Operation Metro Surge in the Twin Cities. Those in arrest include 5 other Somalis, 2 of which have also been convicted of fraud.
If this video helped you understand the wider picture, gently tap the like button so more people can discover it. Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments and subscribe to Voice of Africa, where African stories are told with dignity, clarity, and truth. Until next time, stay informed, stay grounded, and always stand with Africa.